I think I can make
And our-
something.
there's strong feelings towards that.
Yeah,
How everything plays out.
Yeah. Week is a nice soccer week.
Wow.
Look at you.
And I did a few paper copies of the budget, if you need, if
All
not,
right.
I didn't do enough for everybody.
That's
To the budget committee and public. I'm worried. I mean, I can always pull it online.
Website. And it is. A conference. Does it say something on it?
Columbus Community Services.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh.
Insult.
I think my
Which, the first budget committee meeting for the 25-26. Oh, Joe's not here.
You guys,
He's right here.
Oh, there he comes. We'll get started. So this is our first official meeting, so according to the agenda, we have to elect officers and call the meeting to order. So we'll open it, the nominations for officers before we start the official proceeding.
We'll put Craig on the slippery slope and just nominate him for chair again.
I'll second that.
That's pretty fast. Never would have expected.
There are both.
Oh, all those, I thought, all those in favor?
That
took care of Okay, your meeting now. Okay. First two are done. Meeting minutes approval.
Do you want to
You want
do a
vice
vice
chair?
chair?
Sure. I am on the, Shelley.
I'll second that.
That didn't take long either.
Turnabout. All in favor of Shelley? So, yeah,
I move that we approve our meeting minutes as provided in our, I guess, packet, our communication.
You
I
have that
second.
too. yeah.
I'll second. Okay. Is there any questions? Anybody have any comments before we vote? No. All right, all in favor? This. Great, okay. Budget committee review. Is that
That would be Susan and I.
Susan?
That would be ready. I just want to check. Kim Lopez is online. I haven't seen any notes from her, so I just want to. Hopefully she is able to hang out up there. Hopefully she can see. She hasn't commented or anything, so. And I can't see her. So we'll assume that she can see. Everything should be streaming, so. if you
Okay.
want- Yeah.
I was gonna say, if that way, if there's questions or something, I'm happy to.
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
Okay, she's here. She can hear. Thank you, Kim. We'll just,
Uh-huh.
well, welcome, 25-26 budget. We've had our first two. We had an information session and a work session to kind of get a few things started for the budget, and you all received your proposed budget by email and on the website. And so we'll just go through. Basically, what we're gonna share tonight is assumptions on how we built the budget and what we put into it. Knowing what we know from the state and for staffing and everything. So as we go along, feel free to ask questions and we'll save time at the end in case there's any questions. We did have one letter come in by email today, so I can read that when we get to the public comment piece at the end. But comment about that? The first few slides are the same as what you would have seen before, the budget preparation calendar, committee responsibilities. Remember that responsibilities of the budget committee are to receive the budget, hear the budget message, hold the public meetings, hear public comment, discuss and revise the budget, approve the budget and approve the property tax rate, but you're not setting salaries or employee contracts or FTE. You can give input on programs, but not setting things for the district. No altering policies or goals. Our district vision and priorities, again, we've gone through all of these district goals. I went and deleted number 5 from our last meeting. We have taken off that goal from the district. And then we'll get right into the budget message. I wanted to see if Susan wanted to share your take on the budget message first, since you wrote it, and then we could go into all the assumptions.
It's kind of like flipping a coin, and that always happens when you get into a long session year, when the determination of the state school fund budget is kind of somewhat in question. And what's gonna come out of it and what we're gonna get and what we're not gonna get, and the knowns and the unknowns. And so these are the years that you always get to the budget's wrong when it's printed. But it's the best stab at what we know from the state's perspective. The other piece of that, depending upon what happens at a federal level, that folks are trying to hedge their bets. If we're gonna lose funding. And so parts of the conversations at the state level have been open conversation about how would the state access the rainy day fund, and some of their extras that they have, that would be able to not necessarily bail everybody out if we needed to for the year, but it would keep things moving if there was something that significantly changed at a federal level. We also know that there's some things at a state level, that now it's kind of, how do we hedge our bets to know what we need to pull from this piece to add to that piece, and so there's just a lot of juggling balls up in the air. I have to say that Jennifer has done an awesome job, as per typical, in really being able to evaluate and put together a budget that hits the marks for us in terms of our best knowledge of what we've got moving forward.
Wasn't as bad as 2 years ago, I'd say that, but it's still, it's a lot of work to try to fit everything in when you know that, you may not get as much as we would need to continue on everything the way we want. So we know that we're in the first year of the biennium. We're using the governor's recommended budget of 11.359 billion. Which I handed you out a paper copy of the state school fund estimate, so you could read it, not the one that's in the agenda, the PowerPoint presentation. It's a little easier to read. So that state school fund estimate is based on extended ADMW, because we anticipated that next year will be a little bit lower than this current year. So extended ADMW means we'll go back to the higher of 2 years ADMW numbers, which will be last year, unless we start next year and have increased enrollment. And then we'll do an adjustment at that point if we need to. But we're still basing it on the ADMW of this current year. So the calculation shows that we're getting about 16.8 million. I actually put 17 in the budget just to kind of hedge our bets that the governor's going to release a little bit more. We'll talk about some of the legislative session impacts and things that may help us out going forward. It was a nice round number, helped us out a little bit, but I think that is more realistic, a little bit more than the 16.8. But that's not a huge increase from what we had last year, if you could see, knowing that what we have to fit into that increase, it's a little tight. We did what we could. So we'll go through some of these other slides about legislative session impacts, federal funding information. We'll talk about district enrollment, a little bit about staffing considerations, what we put into the budget. We're currently in license negotiations, so that's a bit of an unknown for that group. We've set in the budget a COLA and a step for everybody that we know in there, so that's already factored in. We know we have instructional materials, curriculum replacement, our regional services through LBL we have increased needs and cost, and LBL services, what they give us to provide to cover those services it's going down as well. So we just have to fit more into less cost. We'll talk a little bit about some capital projects and long-range facility planning. Touch on nutrition services, integrated guidance. That's our program that includes student information
Student investment account,
Student investment account,
Um,
Vision 98, early literacy. The Every Student Succeeds. There's multiple programs in there, so we are emulating the same we did last year, same programs. And then the ever-present inflation, cost of services, and some non-K-12 programming. Just go through, you saw the state school fund estimate. I did factor in a property tax increase. Our teacher experience rating is a little bit lower than it has been in the past, just because we're hiring some new teachers, and compared to the average around the state, that's gone down, so that plays into the calculation as well. We're still positive, so that's a good thing. Oh, a lot of other districts, as I glanced through others' estimates, there's a lot that are negative, and so that's a big hit on their calculation for their state school funding. So it's good, we're still positive, above average in our teacher experience rating. So some legislative updates that could factor into the final state school fund and revenue for the state. The next revenue forecast that the state is putting out is on May 14th, and that will drive the final state school fund figures, this final student investment account, Vision 98 budgets, as well as a few other pieces. We've heard that the revenue forecasts may not be quite as good as they've been in previous quarters, but we're not going backwards. The state still has huge reserves. They keep telling us that the state is in a great place to weather a recession if it was to come. We're not concerned about the state not having enough money to cover, but those rainy day funds and the reserves that they have set aside can only, like Susan said, can only be accessed through certain measures. So if it comes to be that the governor's budget does not cover all the needs in the state, they might be able to access some of those if we need to. Like federal funding doesn't come through, they may declare an emergency to build some of those reserves. Another thing we won't know until the final revenue forecast. I don't see the state school fund going down. I think they will stick with the governor's recommended budget or more. So we can continue on with that as our budget estimate for the year. Some of the bills that are still in session, they haven't finalized anything yet. The Senate Bill 849 is a PERS unfunded liability. That one has passed. It's just on the governor's desk for signature. And we'll talk about that a little bit when I talk about PERS rates. But it's a help to offset PERS pension costs, which is great. There's 2 House bills that are still in session to increase the SPED cap. Right now, the SPED cap is at 11% of all of your enrollment or your ADM. You get an extra weight towards IEP students. And our district is currently around 15 or 16%.
15%, yeah.
So the bill introduced is to remove the SPED cap altogether. We've heard talk that they may just increase the cap, but it's not been finalized yet, which would bring more money. We would have more weights to put towards our state school fund calculation.
Right now, what happens with our special education rates at percentages at 15%, we are funded that double weight up to the 11%, but that remaining 4% we don't see. And we're not alone in terms of the number of districts that are seeing those percentages rise. And so the idea of being able to add more to that in terms of service and increase that cap is the goal.
The other House bill that affects the special ed funding is the high cost disability. They want to double the amount that they have to distribute around the state with that cap, which would, right now, I think the latest estimate, we were funded. So we send in the reimbursement, like I said, last month, send in what we've spent on high cost disability, and they send us back the reimbursement. And right now it's at about this for 23-24, I think it ended up being at 30% of what we send in. They've estimated right now, 24-25, we get about 45% back. If they double the high cost disability reimbursement fund, it could go up to about 75 or 80% we could get back. It could be a big help.
What is high cost disability?
We report any student that costs us more than $30,000 to provide education for
Oh, okay.
special ed services.
Gotcha.
And then any expense above that 30,000, they consider in the high cost disability. Senate Bill 5515 and 5516 are just the ODE budget and the state school fund, so those are still in wait for the revenue forecast. There's some other pieces that could have some financial impacts that haven't finished yet. The unemployment benefits for striking workers, class size as a mandatory subject of bargaining, school meals for all, the climate change education bill, which comes with no funding for implementation. The cell phone ban, which we've all heard a lot about that one doesn't come with any funding, and right now it is a bell-to-bell ban. But there's still conversation about where that is gonna end up. And there's a few accountability bills for districts to provide accountability measures to ODE. That one seems a little overreaching, but still in works. And then there's the early literacy bill, which could add funding to our early literacy grant. Always helpful. A few non-financial bills that are in there, makes the educational advisory, equity advisory committee, an advisor to the superintendent, not to the board. So that helps with public meeting law. And the other one is also about school board meetings that only need to be recorded and posted. Not all meetings. So if that Senate bill passes, we won't have to record and live stream budget meetings or negotiation meetings, only school board meetings. We still could do it, but it's not required by law. So all of those haven't been settled yet. So we built the budget with our best estimate of how these are coming into play. We wanted to share federal funding impacts. We talked a little bit about this at our work session and what might affect the district. We've heard that the president's recommended budget is being put out there. And it's recommended that Title I programs continue, IDEA special education programs continue, and nutrition services, we haven't heard anything about them not continuing. So hopefully those will stay status quo. We were given a recommendation early on in the budget season to budget at least 5% lower than what we got this year. So that's what I've built into the budget for all of our federal funding. What we don't know is Title II and Title IV, if those are going to continue. It sounds like those might be discontinued as a funding stream, which Title II is professional development for our staff. And Title IV are extra student supports. We've used that for purchasing band instruments and technology pieces. So those ones might go away. I anticipate we'll still have some carryover from 24-25. That's factored into the budget that's in there, but those budget numbers that I have in the proposed budget may not be as high as what we actually get for next year. There's no FTE in those two, which we don't have to worry about the people. Title 1A is literacy. We have a license and a classified member in there. We anticipate that continuing, and what that 5% less should cover that. We just may not have extra for some supplies or materials. IDEA is our support for special education. And they say that we've heard that should be continuing, but they might be consolidating. Right now, we just get two loans, a large one and a very small one. It might all be consolidated into one and let districts choose how it's spent. We put all of our speech pathologists in that fund. And then we've talked about the nutrition services. We get federal funding for meal reimbursement. It's not the full reimbursement for the meals because we get state funding and federal funding. But I anticipate we would get around 460,000 next year for federal funding for reimbursement if everything stays the same, CEP and meal counts. So that would be a significant hit. I don't think that that's going to happen, but it's something to keep in mind.
And that's the reason for the state's all students eat free, that bill. It's kind of trying to hedge bets and backfill. Should there be something that happens, or should they change the accepted rates for community eligibility, which is the CEP, where everybody gets to eat free. The way that worked is it used to be that the percentage of free and reduced was it had to be at 60% in order for you to qualify. they dropped that down to in the mid 20% range, which is why Philomath now qualifies. So there's conversation about might that poverty percentage lift back up again, or not. And so what the state's trying to do is really to be able to say, what can we do at a state level that would hedge our bets a little bit and help us out if we needed to.
There's federal funding. We don't have a huge amount in there. Some districts have much more, but still have to consider it. Our enrollment slide seems like a roller coaster lately. Not huge changes across the district, but you could see, if you compare to the enrollment numbers in our last presentation, the 23-24 numbers were about 1680, but this is actual ADMR, which is the calculated amount for the year. What I reported was enrollment, and that's what the 1620 is. And enrollment and ADM are a little bit different. Enrollment is kind of a snapshot of how many students are in the district at the time. And ADM is a calculation of their attendance, average daily attendance per member. So one student might only be there for 3/4 of the year, so they count for 3/4 of a student. So that's why ADM is always a little bit different than enrollment. And that's why ADM for 23-24 is a little bit lower than what I had reported for enrollment. Still higher than what we have this year, definitely. You may have noticed a difference in the FTE, total FTE, between what was adopted for 24-25 and what's in the proposed budget for 25-26. There's a bit of a difference. I just wanted to point that out so you can see if there was any questions. Some of them are, one of them is our contract to service for speech pathologist, and in the past we've had it as a person, and I changed it to a service. The money's still there, it just changed. The FTE is gone. We removed a couple of vacancies that have been in there hanging out that were a bit of a cushion, but I needed to remove them in order to balance the budget. We have one admin member leaving the ranks and not replacing that FTE. And then we have a couple of retirements and resignations that we're gonna wait to fill. So they're not in the proposed budget at the moment. If we end up getting more funding, we could bring them back. But for the moment, we're gonna hold them out. Not a huge FTE change. Again, fortunate compared to our neighbors who are losing 20 to 30 FTE. Huge budget cuts. I put these slides together again for you all just to see, to compare the total of the budget, which is the 57 million, and how much of it is just the general fund and what makes up the general fund. Taxes, miscellaneous revenue, intermediate funds, which we don't have a huge amount, and then the state school fund and our beginning fund balance. I anticipate our beginning fund balance, or any fund balance from this year, to be about 2.3 million, which is about what we budgeted for last year. We ended up starting this year a little bit lower than 2.3, but not a huge amount. And so I anticipate we'll go into next year with that same amount, which is good because we may have to dip into it for next year. I haven't done a full forecast, but knowing that if our enrollment keeps declining, we may have to dip into a bit of reserves for next year to balance. With percentages. And then I did the same for expenditures and how the general fund looks compared to all the other funds. And remember that revenues and expenditures have to equal for the balance, budget to balance. There's a lot of information on this slide, but I just wanted to show how what we budgeted for 24-25 is a little bit different than what we're actually at because our enrollment went down and our state school funding decreased a bit for the general fund. So from what we budgeted for 24-25 to what 25-26 budgeted is about a $760,000 increase for general fund altogether. But from our actual revenue to budgeted, it's almost $1 million. So just because of the decrease in what we actually, and we've made adjustments for those decrease throughout the year. a part of the general fund. We've talked about the transfers. We take a piece of the general fund and transfer it to the other funds. We've, made a few considerations that are a little bit different this year. We're still gonna, send a little bit to the preschool fund. We promise to help support that, along with, strengthening rural families, gathering funds to help support preschool and KPI funding, grant funding. The 10,000 is a bit of a token to help fund the program. But since we don't get funding for those ages, this is what we can do.
This, I'm sorry,
No,
this,
go for it.
this year we've, there was Birth to Five funds that the, Early Learning Hub received. And, Philomath applied for and received $75,000 of that funding, for the year. And so that's what has allowed us to be able to, keep the preschool in operation for the full year. And to do a slight increase in, office support, at Clemens to be able to help out in that way. There's no guarantee that that money would be available next year, let alone if we could apply for it and get it again. And so, we continue to be in conversation with Strengthening Rural Families about the who's and the how. They're very hesitant as an organization to charge any tuition. And so right now it continues to be free for all the students who participate. And 4 years, 4 years ago, they doubled their enrollment. And so, there's the question about, will they maintain their same enrollment or will they drop it back down based on, what they know and where they are? It's hard when you look at too, that, Head Start funding is going away, you know, in large parts. And so, it's a frustrating place to be. But we also know that to work on a reduction in force for staff members who, teach the students that generate revenue, and maintain a preschool of students that don't generate revenue. Even though I believe about preschool with every fiber of my being as being one of the most important things for kids, is a real tough space to be. But that's a place we have to think about.
The other fund where we put money into and don't receive any, state school funding for the pool, I kept that at a $75,000 transfer to the pool to help with operations. At our board meeting this week, we'll have a resolution to approve to help offset the pool fund, because it's gonna be overspent this year as it is. We've had a lot more use because of Osborne being closed. So the pool has seen a lot more activity. We haven't brought in the fees to offset that, so. And we started the year in the deficit with the pool, so I need to correct that as well. We didn't bring in as much. I was waiting to see how the revenue forecast looked for the pool budget, and we didn't bring in enough to offset that deficit this year, so but we had some savings in our unemployment fund. We put quite a bit aside for 24-25 to cover unemployment expenses, and we didn't see the claims that we thought we would, so we didn't need as much, so I'm hopeful that the board approves using that, and we can talk about that at the board meeting, but we didn't need as much for the unemployment, so I cut that back, and we'll use some of that to cover the pool offset. And so we'll start the year fresh with a zero balance in the pool, and Eugenia, our pool director, has done a great job of evaluating the use and the needs and fee structures to try to match neighboring districts, and so we'll see. One more year, we'll just keep plugging away with the pool. I still have money set aside to put into the capital reserves that was set up in 23-24. The food service, we have $10,000 to put in there. We have a mandatory match that we have to do every year to food service. We haven't had to supplement our food service program with general fund yet. We just have to put away that mandatory match, which has been between 5,000 and 8,000. I just set aside 10 just in case. Just a little token, so far the nutrition services account is positive. I think some other districts have seen it go the opposite direction with the CEP program. It's a lot more meals served. We get a lot of reimbursements, and I think our staffing has done a good job of cutting down, or not cutting down, but being efficient on what we've ordered. So we've stayed in the black, which is good. Which means we may be able to purchase another freezer for the couple of the kitchens by the end of the year, which will make them happy. We have our capital projects fund and the technology replacement fund. I have a couple more slides talking about that. We're gonna put some more into the unemployment fund because it could still happen. We could still get more claims this summer. I want to make sure that's covered. And then our classified pet fund and the licensed insurance pool, those are set by their bargaining agreements, so that's what's set aside to put into those. A little bit less for the transferred funds. I think last year we had 980,000, this year 710. Cut back on that a little bit. Here's our capital reserve fund. We were fortunate enough in 23-24 because of our increased enrollment and because of our local option levy came in higher, and we got state forest fees were really high. We were able to set aside some in a reserve to get that started. We didn't have one before, so that was a priority. Our transfers for this current year, 24-25, I did those. I have not done the turf reserve transfer because we haven't done the turf project, and we're still buying turfs for the fields to the tune of $8,000 to $10,000. So we said, once we stop buying the turfs to help with the field prep, we would put that money aside in the turf replacement fund. So since we're not doing that yet, I didn't put it aside. So at the end of this year, that's where our reserves will be. I'm proposing to do those transfers in that column. So it will grow a little bit by the end of 25-26, but it feels good to have those pockets of money to pull from, just in case a boiler goes down or a roof leaks or a server goes down with technology. We need to have those in place to be able to cover those expenses. Just a few pieces about capital projects. I have a transfer of 225,000 going into their fund from the general fund. I'm estimating they'll have at least 70,000 rolled over from this year. They didn't spend quite as much as we had set aside. So they'll have about 300,000 for capital projects next year. Joey has a list. He's coming to the board meeting, so I didn't want to steal his thunder and tell you all what he wants to do, but he has some good things planned. And then technology, we know there's a lot of technology needs, and we started this year. We had a lot set aside. We've got started on it, and we have more to do as next year starts. Staff machine replacements, classroom technology, new lines for each classroom, student Chromebooks. We want to continue on a schedule of replacing those annually. We have some more security and communication pieces that need to be upgraded. So I have a transfer proposed of 175,000. I think they'll have a little bit remaining from this year. I missed, says 24-24 instead of 24-25, sorry. But we also have some grant funds to help with technology needs. We have money in our SIA grant and mid-98 set aside for some technology purchases. So that helps boost that technology replacement fund as well. I didn't know I had this one set to come up in sections. A few other budgetary pieces that we have to take into account. Bonds, we have 2 outstanding bonds. We have the PERS bond that helps offset our PERS rates. I have another slide that shows the PERS rates, but our PERS bond, 2 years ago, I figured out we were pulling too much and setting aside too much. So I reduced the rate, which helped save on expenses. I think I mentioned that last year. And because of increased salary expenses and what we've been pulling, I realized we can reduce that again. So our PERS bond expenditures, I've calculated out to the end of the bond, which is 2027. We should glide into that with a much reduced rate of collection. So we don't have to set aside nearly as much. We'll just pull from it. And you can see in Fund 314 in the proposed budget that the ending balance is quite a bit lower at the end of 25-26 than we started with, because we're pulling from it. We don't need to pull as much to set aside. That was an aha moment that helped for the last 2 years. That's good. There's been recommendation to not pursue new side account bonds at the moment, just because of the way the economy is working. We're still working with Piper Sandler is the big group that helps us figure out all things bonds. And they are continually updating us on the prospect of what it looks like. We have webinars, we have in our conferences, there's sessions. Everybody is interested in these first bond offsets. Our capital bond, I have some more on that, but that's our general obligation bond that we have to set the levy for with the budget committee. So we'll have to talk about that more in a minute. We only have 2 investment accounts, the local government investment pool. One is our general account, and then the other one is where our sinking fund sits for the bond, the large payoff that we have to do. And those accounts average 5% interest earnings for this year, just like last year. So that was a help with our revenue for the year as well. And then our first pension rates, I have another slide to talk about that, but that Senate Bill 849, they used some reserves that the PERS has been set aside, I think $168 million. They used to help offset the PERS rates for school districts. And so we anticipated that our rates were going to go up about 5.5%, but with that relief, it's more about 4%. So that helped offset some. And that reduced rate is worked into the budget. So I've already taken that into account. So if you see, these are the PERS pension rates that we have to pay for employees' salary amounts. It was supposed to go up, from 19.1 to 24.9. And then we have the Senate bill rate relief to help offset it. But we also have to consider the 6% pickup that we also pay on top of the pension rates. We put in 6% for all of our employees for PERS. So Tier 1, Tier 2 members are close to 30% PERS rate. And the OPSERT members are 26% for their PERS pension rates. I put the regular school district rate down at the bottom, and that's what all districts pay as their rate that don't have the side account. So that's the same rate as our net pension contribution rate. So you can see right now we have about a 5% savings with our side account or bond that helped to offset. But as that goes away, we'll just match the regular school district rate. And there's quite a few districts that didn't have the side accounts to help offset. We'll just be joining the ranks of all of them. Capital bond, the sinking fund, where we have to pay a $20 million payment at the end June of 2027. So we've been setting aside payments. We set the bond levy each year, around the $2 million. The taxpayers send us money when we put those bond proceeds into the sinking fund account. For the past 2 years, we've been earning interest on that account at a pretty large amount. This year, it's going to be about $600,000. So that sinking fund balance will be higher than it needs to be if we continue to levy at the same rate. I've talked to our bond counsel, I've talked to Piper Sandler, and I've talked to a rate consultant about this. My head was spinning a few weeks ago, thinking about what happens when we have more money in that account than we can need to pay off the bond. We can't use those proceeds for anything else besides bond payments. We can't take them out and use them for anything else. So I asked, what's the implication of having more money in there than we need at that $20 million payoff? They advised that we can use those earnings and spread them out over, because we have one more session of the bond to pay off. We pay off the large lump sum in 27, and then there's another 3.5 years after that where we have to make bond payments, large, same size of payments. So we could take those earnings and spread it out over the next 5 years to help offset the levy and kind of glide into the finish line on that one too. There's still some calculations to do, but they assured me that we can do that. There may be some federal impacts to having those excess earnings in that account. And we're going to have a rate consultant work with us and figure out what that looks like. Everybody I've talked to about these bonds said, oh, it's a QSCAB bond is the name of it. And he said, those were put in place 2008, 2010 to help with the recession type economy issues. Very complicated, and I felt like I couldn't find the information, and they said, well, yours is a pretty unique situation. So I've been digging for answers on how to make it work for us, but I think we have a plan. So we'll still levy similar amounts as we have in the past. It will just be a bit of a tax relief for the community for the next 5 years until we go out for bond again. It's not huge. I think it's about a $200,000 difference from where we would traditionally bond. Our set aside payment for June of 26 is 2.4 million. And we don't need that much. So I dropped it down to about 2.2 million, a little bit less than that. Did a calculation, and I think we need to bond at about 85% of the standard just to help us. Because once we pay off that $20 million large sinking fund, we won't be earning nearly as much interest in that account. So we can use that interest to offset the future fund levies.
And we don't want to have to pay it to the federal government.
Want to have to pay too much. We may end up having some implication we have to pay back, because we get a federal interest bond subsidy each year to help offset the interest that we have to pay on the bond. And it's so complicated and confusing, but because we get that bond subsidy and we've had excess earnings, we may owe some arbitrage back to the federal government. I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm still working on getting the calculations. There's people that do that. But that's for sure. And that's really what we used for assumptions for building this budget. I'm sure there's questions and comments. We could talk about that. The one question. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, the public comment side of it, the letter that we got today, that came with an email. I've noticed that you are having a budget meeting tonight. Janet Selby has tirelessly worked on the attached letter with some other people's input. I'm trying to get this in front of the proper people and hope that this letter will be read and realize how important this position is for students, and for Simon, so it's the forestry program, and for future success as is stated in the letter. Thank you, and when I return, I'll check back on status. Yeah, that's kind of the email that came with it. The letter says, Dear Miss Halliday, forestry is a special class that builds on a student's knowledge foundation. Just like math, each section of forestry pushes a student to gain more experience with a new set of factors. The advanced classes taught at Philomath High School were constructed years ago to meet the needs of students that were attracted to a hands-on learning environment. The first few years, they studied the basics of the subject, but in the advanced classes, they spent time out in the field actually putting those ideas and fundamental principles to work. For this to be successfully accomplished, special scheduling considerations had to be enacted. The blocking of 2 classes together was essential so that students could leave the school grounds and carry out assignments. When students leave the classroom, they receive actual work experience. They practice initiative, safety, responsibility, and leadership when working as a team to finish a project that the teacher deems they are ready for. Philomath High School has the only program in the area that teaches real forest practices. Students from other schools have attended our high school to take advantage of a unique learning experience. The students who go completely through this program are ready to enter the workforce with practical work experience combined with safety training. The goal of Philomath High School is to have 100% graduation of their high school students. The forestry program not only helps students that would like to enter into the field of forestry, but any student who travels through this hands-on training has been given the basis to be a great employee in whatever field they decide to pursue. Discussions with industry professionals reiterate the importance of having forestry career technical education programs in our high schools. The students that graduate from these programs enter the workforce with a solid knowledge and understanding of basic forestry concepts and are immediately employable. It has additionally been noted that these students have a solid work ethic due to their experience from hands-on training through their off-campus work projects. We thank you for your time considering budgeting the position of forestry instructional aid position under Simon Babcock. With this aid position funded, forestry students will continue to thrive and be given a strong background and more opportunities available if they choose this career. Sincerely, Laurel Smouse, who is a parent within our community. So that was the information we received this afternoon. And we needed to share as part of public comment. What I told Mrs. Smouse was, this is a position of the forestry instructional assistant that we hired this spring, is paid for out of the excess in an older awarded Ford Family Foundation grant. So it's not a general fund expenditure, and it hasn't been. If there's money left over in that at the end of this school year, and the school is able to work out its continuation with Ford Family Foundation and chooses to use the money in that way, which was specific to natural resources, it may be an option. But I left it at that, just in terms of what the past history had been. So wanted to be able to share that piece of information.
Well, that being said, what's the possibility of going to somebody like a Weyerhaeuser and seeing if they can help fund that instructional assistant position on a recurring basis so that it doesn't become general fund money or it doesn't get cut?
And I think there's all kinds of things that we can look at across the board. We're looking right now at our CTE enrollment at the same time to be able to take a look at what's happening in programs. And we're seeing a drop in our forestry participation. And that we're not seeing in our other CTE areas of instruction. And so we're trying to figure out kind of where's that coming from and what does that mean and what does that look like?
Well,
But as far as an instructional assistant to ask for other funding, I think that's absolutely a possibility.
could that drop in the forestry be partly because they know that there's not much in the upper level of it, with the block period and being able to go out and actually physically do the job? And so they're not showing that much interest in it?
And that could be the reason we dropped back the double period last year for the forestry program was there were 4 students in it for a two block class period.
Yeah,
And so if we get more of the interest coming back in the earlier ones, then it's certainly open to be added back. Absolutely.
yeah, because I mean, being from that industry, I've seen a huge decline in recent years as far as people that want to go into that industry and actually want to work in the industry because they haven't had the opportunity when they were younger to get involved in it and see kind of weigh the benefit of it or not. And yeah, it's hard work. I mean, who wants to go out and work in the rain setting chokers all day? I mean, that's not a good thing. But as things progress, there's not as many choker setters as there used to be because they're using feller bunchers and shovel logging a lot more. And there's an opportunity to run equipment as opposed to being what we used to call a breast monkey. So that's, I don't know, I think it would be a tough sell to actually take that program down any more than it already is.
Right, and that's where one of the other reasons we're looking at just the program patterns in general is, what do we need to do to revive and revitalize? I mean, I look at health occupations in, the COVID times when nobody could put their hands on things and our numbers went down. We're seeing those numbers climbing, because we're not in COVID anymore, but there's more opportunity. And so I see the same thing in terms of forestry. What do we need to do in order to be able to, enhance, encourage, revitalize?
Well, I think a lot of what needs to be done in that part of things is, partners with John Deere, Cat. You know, the equipment manufacturers that manufacture the timber industry, equipment. And let the kids have hands-on experience in this, opportunity through the forestry program, make partnerships with, you know, John Deere and Cat and Hitachi and whoever else has the equipment. And I think that would bring a lot of kids into that program,
Would agree.
wanting to learn how to operate that equipment and having the experience of operating it when they go into the workforce and say, yes, I know how to operate that. And that would be a big plus for these loggers that, you know, now have to train them, and that costs a lot of money.
Yep.
So I think that what we as a district should do is try to set up some partnerships with the logging industry, people that build the machines and have the machines, and see if we can't get some sort of partnership going with them where the kids can actually get some seat time in them.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. I do.
That makes me curious about the College of Forestry, like on the other end, I don't know enough to know if that would mesh at all, but I know there's like some specific scholarships for certain majors in the College of Forestry program that are being underutilized right now. And so Oregon State University and the College of Forestry is another avenue of potential partnership to kind of increase interest. I mean, I only know that because someone randomly told me, hey, this major it has a related scholarship, it doesn't have a high like rate of people doing it, I don't know how many people know about it, so I feel like that's another thing that might be.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of kids from this program go through the College of Forestry.
Yep.
And be very successful, and the one that comes to mind is Lori's daughter, Jill. You know, she works for Weyerhaeuser now, worked for Weyerhaeuser for a lot of years.
Yeah.
But she went through this program, went through the College of Forestry, got her degree, you know, and went to work, and when, that was back when women were not, a big part of
Right.
that type of workforce. She was kind of an outlier type thing that, but she does a wonderful job, and, you know, Paloma should try to get more graduates like that continue and do that type of thing, whether it be that or any other program,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I
Great,
do think this
great,
is an
great.
important topic, but we're far afield.
Thank you.
Of the task
That's what I was
ahead of
just
us
gonna
today.
Hey, I'm just trying to get that out there, so.
That's what I was gonna say.
Because I could
Sarah,
talk
you beat
about
me to it.
CTE and graphic design for at least as long as we just talked about that.
Oh,
I'll hold
oh,
it to myself. I'll hold it to myself, so,
Let's get back to the budget.
I
yes.
think Shar had a question.
I have multiple, if that's okay. Is this the right time to do it?
We have time for questions, yeah.
Okay, I forget what the difference between ADMW and ADMR, ADMR, yes. What's the difference?
So ADMR is like a student body. Every student is a ADMR. And,
Okay.
It's similar to enrollment, but ADMR is like, it's average daily membership. So
Okay,
when, like, one student is here for most of the year, we get a 1.0 ADM for that person. So it's just the single weight for each body that comes. The ADMW is the added weights we get. We get an extra weight for up to 11% IEP students, poverty students, remote school, so all of
I
those.
knew there was something
Yeah.
and I was missing.
And that's why ADMW is always higher.
Yes, okay. And that's what you usually go by. You just use the ADMR as a base and then you add in all those extras.
Well,
Like
the state does,
The state does.
yeah, to calculate,
To
state school
calculate.
fund.
Yeah, okay. Then do you know how much we're losing, on our IEP cap? Like if there wasn't a cap, do you know the dollar amount that we,
The dollar amount, I don't know, but we would probably be up. And another, right now it's capped at 11%, which is about 180 students. And we
Right.
have close to 250.
that's significant.
Yeah, it's a big.
That's
a lot.
significant.
Yeah.
And, then I've taken that a little bit deeper, how many of those IEPs that we are not getting funded for are transfers? Is that a
Yeah.
calculation that we can find out within the budget? Is that a budget
It's,
number that we can?
it's not something that would
Calculate.
affect the budget and we can't not take a transfer.
Right.
Yeah. But are you thinking?
I'm just thinking of all of these transfers that are coming in that are increasing our workload. But yet we're not getting the revenue to match the needs for that workload, increased workload. And so
Yeah,
I'm just,
and that's hopefully what those Senate bills will
Okay.
help offset.
and do you know what the Senate bills are? You said that they maybe would increase the cap
Mhm.
or
The
not
hope is that the cap would go away,
go
but
away, but
I
what would
think
be
they'll
the
probably come
increase?
in the middle and maybe bring it down to a 13 to 15% cap
Okay,
instead of the 11%.
and
So
but that still wouldn't be the full amount. We're up to what, like 17% or something?
We're sitting at 15, 16 right now,
15, 16?
across the district.
Okay,
And, so yeah,
Okay.
there would still be a little, but it would be
Yeah.
certainly better than it is,
yeah,
So to clarify, across the district, including Kings Mountain.
including Kings Valley.
okay.
Yeah.
And then, I think this also, it just kind of goes with the IEP. I noticed on the budget, the speech IEPs, do they also get the same amount of funding as a traditional IEP? So it's the same,
Yeah, I get,
Interesting.
wait for any.
same weight?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, sorry, I just have a few more. Is that all right?
Yeah.
They're really
Yeah.
quick.
It
Okay.
probably helps everybody too.
Okay.
understand.
The 2.3 million, that is what you have a beginning and ending balance.
Mhm.
I think it comes out to what, like 8 point some% or something. Is that the typical, or that seems kind of high to me?
Well, our board policy says we should have 4.5%.
Right, so then,
Most districts recommend at least 8 to 8.5, because 4.5% would hardly cover a month's worth of expenditures if we needed to dip into that reserve. That reserve also includes, or the any fund balance also, includes, no, sorry, my brain just went, phew. It includes the contingency and the unappropriated fund balance, but there are also some, a little bit extra in there. Besides those two, the 4.5%,
okay.
yeah.
And then that comes to what you just brought up is, tell me, why you have a contingency, that, what you just said, contingency and unappropriated?
So the
Funds.
contingency is a just in case,
Okay.
our board policy says we have to set aside 1.5%
1.5%, okay,
for a just in case, we have to have it, and then the
Okay.
board can say whether or not can use it.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
And,
And then the unappropriated fund balance is really, it's set aside in case we don't get funding from the state for July and August. That has to be there so we could dip into that to pay the bills if we have to start the year off.
and just reiterating that the 600K is just interest from the capital bond sinking funds. We could not use that money to
No,
do staff raises.
no, because that is interest earned on bond proceeds and it's in that sinking fund.
Who do I
bond.
talk to about that?
Um,
I'm just kidding.
IRS?
Remembering I heard these things.
I believe they have 3 employees now, so.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I just have two and they're really quick. You said that there is a deficit, from the pool,
Mhm.
and I know the Osborne issue. Is there any way that we can get some money funded through the school districts? Because it's between the Corvallis,
We've been in
City?
conversation with
Okay.
Osborne when the issue started,
uh-huh,
and we were, talking to Park and Rec with them. We haven't heard much back. We've just gotten increased revenues from fees, from increased usage.
okay,
And for Corvallis High School swim team's use of the facility, they paid us.
okay.
And so,
Some.
they paid for staffing, chemicals, you know, those kinds of things, and so, it was a very reasonable, but not undercut, expense that they were used to from the rentals they'd had.
Okay,
Our conversation started with Corvallis Parks and Rec, where they were ready to be able to do some things with us. And all of a sudden, the conversations just stopped. And so we're trying to work on that. I do know that, Sarah Gelser Bluen put together a bill to propose donating $5 million to the Osborne repairs. I don't know what a status of that is, but the other piece of that puzzle is that's not even gonna touch the repairs that they've got. So they're in conversations all over the place. But Eugenia, I think, has done a great job of being able to take a look at what are our rates for people who are swimmer skier. And we've got a number of people who have said, we're just gonna move our membership over and we're gonna pay for the lap swimming here. Because originally we had talked about with Corvallis Parks and Rec about, you have people who have paid memberships over there, will you pay us with their leftover membership so that they can swim with us? And it just never came to fruition, but we're keeping our eye on where's Osborne versus where are we, and yeah.
one last, one. It's about the meal program. Is there rules and regulation about how that's done? Like, we have to follow, what I'm trying to get at is that two parts. It seems like a lot of people that could afford to pay for the meal are not paying for it. So that's one thing that I'm thinking about revenue.
Excuse me.
And then the other one is, I know some people just want milk to supplement theirs, and they have to pay for that. Versus then, so instead of paying for that for 65 cents, they go and get the whole meal. Well, then we're creating waste, because they really don't want the meal, but basically you take it all. And they just want the milk, and everything else goes in the trash. So I'm wondering if we can somehow, instead of getting paid for that full amount, do the 65 cents. Am I making any sense?
Thank
Yeah,
you, thank
And then
you,
that
thank
we're
you,
creating more
USDA rules.
revenue.
USDA dictates what we can
That's what I
do.
was wondering.
Yeah,
Okay, so
we could cover the cost of milk on our own if we wanted to as a district. But we can't have that be a reimbursable expense. We can't claim that extra milk. It has to be a full meal to get the reimbursement from USDA and from ODE. Which the rules are, I
Yeah.
guess they were put in place for a reason, but they're really hard to follow.
okay,
And we can't accept payments because we're on the community eligibility program.
Okay.
We're CEP, so all kids eat free.
okay,
We charge the adults, but we can't charge first meal. We can charge for second meals.
so you said that there's some excess in that,
A little bit, yeah.
and I was just thinking, but you were really just get paid based on what you served.
Yep, we claim each meal. We
Okay,
tell ODE how
okay.
many meals we've served, and we get paid a certain amount for lunch and a certain amount for breakfast.
Okay,
And we get that claim revenue back just based on the meals served.
okay.
So
Good
this is
question.
Shar, she's our, I'm gonna let you know, she's our vice president of our teachers union, and I'm Nicole, I'm the president of our teachers union, and we have Alice over here, she's part of, Alice and I sit on the bargaining team for the teachers, which we're bargaining that they said this year and everything. And, first, I just want to acknowledge, you're amazing. So I appreciate all the hard work that you do into everything, and so I just wanted to let you know that it's seen and we appreciate that, so. I just hope that when you guys look at the bargaining, look at the numbers and create a budget for the next year, that, we're here trying to let you know how desperate the teachers are, and like wanting you to hear the need for, compensation, that it's important to us. We love our district. I know the school board here does too, the parents and everybody that's volunteering. We want to stay in this district. The students are amazing. Our staff is amazing. We want to retain our teachers, and I think we do that because of the environment that we've created here. And we do have a younger staff coming on board. It's becoming more, and that, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, our starting wages for our younger members, it's not always a livable wage. It really isn't. And they struggle. And most of them, not most of them, there's a good portion of them that have 2 jobs. So they teach in the day and they work at night. And I just want you to know that and take that in consideration when you're setting the budget. Also, I know it was a conversation about technology. Technology has been hit hard in our district the last couple of years. I can't even begin to tell you how hard it's been. And again, we have an amazing technology department that has saved the district of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they do what they can with the budget that they have, and they do very well, but they can't fix technology when it just is old and that there's nothing else to do, and the security risks are great. And they've spent a lot of time focusing on protecting our district. That's really where their money and effort has been, and we're grateful for that. We truly are. And, we also need to, make sure that they have the appropriate funding to do what they need to do. And so, for those 2 issues, so thank you.
Well, thanks. And good question.
Questions, comments?
Kind of a small question, but back with the federal funding impacts, wasn't sure I was tracking a little bit there around, is it that would it be the state billing if the federal would the state like reduce the percentage? Like it got lifted to 60%. I'm trying to bring my brain back to this whole area. I'm like, I don't know if we helped have the slide, but basically I couldn't quite track what the state would be backfilling. Would the state be reducing the percentage, or is that if the federal government reduced the percentage?
It's an
the
if.
State would backfill. Thank
It's an
you.
if, yeah.
With the
back to the
potential dissolution of Department of Education.
Oh, I understand why.
Just that little, little thing.
You're talking about the Title II-A and Title IV-A up there?
You were talking about the
Really all
food
of them.
service stuff too, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That Title IA, the literacy, the allocation is that you said that was 1 licensed teacher and 1 classified. Does that also include curriculum?
It includes a little bit for supplies, but not a huge
It's
amount.
not the whole instructional materials package,
Yeah.
It's not.
because we don't get, that's the other thing when we look at it, we don't get a huge amount
Yeah.
in that. Would it hurt us if we didn't get it? Yeah, but is it gonna hurt us as bad as it's gonna hurt some other folks? You know, we've got some districts in the state that they have lovingly called over the years the $1 Million Club in Title I. And, you know, if it goes away for them, it's a huge hit. So,
We have much more literacy supports in our SIA funding. We have the early literacy grant now. So
Okay.
That helps support the whole
That.
program.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does Kim have any questions or comments?
Kim, have you got questions or comments? I've been kind of watching to see if there's any chat in there, and there hasn't been any online chat.
Nope, I'm just listening.
Nope, she said she's just listening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're just wrapping
Yep.
up.
Thank you.
Have you heard, I just got like a tangent question off of this side conversation that I was very rudely having. I'm not gonna throw anyone else. I have heard around the topic of, the food services, the federal food services, that they will potentially, because every day is a new, what are they gonna do? They will potentially be changing poverty levels across all of the programs to disqualify more people from the programs. So that would be
That could be.
what could trigger
Mhm.
us losing that funding.
Well, and that's, yeah, and that's what we're seeing in food banks and things like that. So our communities are already losing food availability, and that's the concern is the kids are eating right now at school. But we've got families that can't get food for the weekend or can't, I mean, the things that they rely on from the food bank, they as a family are not getting now. And so, how do we, it's kind of like the students eating at school is just one piece of the puzzle. But yeah, it's,
Yeah, and that could affect our eligibility. for
Yeah, it could.
the OKC CEP program. So once again, it's an unknown, but at that point, we would go back to self-pay for whoever didn't qualify for reduced, free or reduced meals.
Which would be even more students at that point, because
Yeah,
they would have adjusted who qualifies and who doesn't.
right.
yeah, and the conversation I had with, I stopped by the middle school kitchen the other day and, they had all the sixth graders gone for outdoor school last week. And they have roughly 115 sixth graders. And she said 100 of those students I've discovered eat with us regularly, of just our sixth graders. So that tells you what the free food is doing, for the numbers of students who are eating. Because she said, normally we have an impact, we see less students. We see our numbers go down, our service numbers, because we know we have a grade level out, but 100? She said, it just blew me away that it was that many.
And this is slightly off topic, but I can't wait to see what it starts doing to our test scores and grades and attendance and all of that when we've had a little bit more time of this program. It's not hungry, it's easier to learn, right?
Yep.
The point about beginning teachers and funds, makes me think too about the sort of declining experience of teachers, like knowing that there's sort of a more global problem right now in terms of really supporting teachers. We're doing our best here, but also thinking about that, like, okay, are they needing to go to food banks because we can't offer a livable wage with everything right now? Or, how does that impact in the long run, the funds available based on the experience, that retention? What are the things that, I know we can't, I'm not trying to make any, I don't want to be in charge of the programs. Thank you. But I'm curious, I know there's different ways that districts have made moves to particularly try to support and retain new teachers, and there's some creative ways to add into that. So that's coming to mind, since that's very important for the future as well, just like kind of the teacher equivalent of, this is a bad comparison. I used to be a teacher, so I really mean this out of good place, but like the same way it's important to fund pre-K, because that impacts things down the line, or to feed people because that impacts their ability to learn. That beginning teacher pay scale or other supports really has an impact down the line as well.
Thank you.
So, I guess the question is, first of all, do we have enough people to vote on the budget here?
Yes, yes.
Yes, we have a forum.
And Kim is here too.
Because, yeah, you don't have. All right, are there, from my perspective, looking at what you said, based on kind of the summary of the budget, to me, it feels like not a lot of big items, big concerns, like, oh, this one thing is a question mark. Yes, there are state things that are still happening, but it seems like you've kind of got some margin around them and have
Trying.
some buffer so that you can kind of roll with however it happens.
And remember, if we set a budget and the board adopts it, we can always change it.
Yeah.
With supplemental budgets in the future if more revenue comes in.
And do you think that anything will, with, the May 14th revenue forecast, will there be anything significant enough of a change between now and then?
I haven't heard significant changes. We won't know all of the legislative bills, whether or not they'll be all passed as well. I think if, personal opinion, I haven't heard this outright them say, if anything, I think our state school fund will go up a bit, but not a huge significant amount. I think it's those bills that need to be passed or not passed that will affect funding. And we may not know that until the end of June.
We can always do a supplement, worst case scenario, we do a supplemental budget. If we have, what is the threshold for a supplemental budget?
10% in the fund that you're affecting.
Okay.
To pass the budget as proposed.
If so, I have the language. If you're not ready, we don't have to do it. I'll have that available.
Does anybody feel strongly that we need a second budget meeting?
I feel hesitant, at least with, there's so much up in the air right now. There seems to be hope that some of that might be less transitional in the near future. So I do feel hesitant to approve it now. Small benefit for waiting.
But what is up in the air that you're concerned about specifically?
Just mostly funding, it sounds like. And it sounds like throughout the rest of this month, there will be some information coming in that will kind of solidify some of that.
So as a percentage difference, I mean, I guess I hear you, and yes, there are things coming in. But as an overall percentage and impact to the budget. Jennifer, do you feel that you've got enough buffer built into what you've done? I mean, it seems to me like she's got buffers and a lot of what could potentially change is on the upside. Meaning the state could potentially increase our budget, which is not a bad thing. We end up with more revenue that we could then allocate out. The downside is some of the state things. But I don't feel, at least for me, I don't feel like those would significantly impact the budget to the point where we need to wait for it.
Because again, it's that threshold of the 10% change.
Right.
It would take a lot to do that in any significant categories.
Right. And so if it falls outside of the 10%, then yes, that's significant and we can have another budget
Reconvene.
committee meeting. Reconvene for that.
And if there's something similar, if it goes, is the 10% plus or minus, or is that just, okay, thank you, supplement was what I was clarifying. And then it seems like some of the things that would have potentially a negative financial impact, there's no reason to think that that will be clear, even if we know how the bills go by the end of June. And I think we have to have we'd be running without a budget if we didn't have a budget by July 1st, correct? Is it?
There's no provision for not adopting a budget
We have.
by July 1st.
Yeah. And some of those things are more, those unfunded mandate pieces, that's gonna take a while to figure out, like, what does that cost and how do you do that? That's not something that districts would, I imagine, be able to immediately adopt with some of those.
Yeah.
They seemed vague.
Yeah, and those are some conversations that, you know, we are also being encouraged. I don't think I've talked to legislators quite so much as I have this year. Just in terms of the please consider in a couple of different areas. And what that might look like. So, And we're hearing that it makes a difference. That, it's kind of like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. And so, that's the nice part.
And some of the federal funding impacts, we may not know until August, September, so that's a little too long to wait.
As far as the state school fund though, I mean, just in general, in terms of that number, this is one of the first times I have not heard that number waver from the beginning of conversations. Nobody had said, well, it has to be less than that. It's just kind of been an accepted, at least in terms of general conversation, as there's no question this is where we need to start. And so that's kind of what we've operated off of, in the belief that at least the largest part of it, the state school fund, I would be highly surprised if it came in at less than what it's set up to be right now.
Right, they did it, there's been a lot of work to bring that up.
Yep.
This year.
And I believe that's very unusual. It's like an unprecedented
It is.
level of stability and
Mhm.
support for school funding.
Yep,
So
it
if
is.
anything, it's more sure than in many other budget
I mean,
years.
I think it's a combination of school districts that are way in deficit in their budgets, including huge districts like Portland and Salem. And the fact that PERS increases that have, that most of the increase in the budget is taken up by paying off PERS. So, I mean, that's,
That is a huge chunk of the payroll cost increase, is the first.
Is there a motion to pass the budget language?
I'll read it. Is this, the only question I got, 57 million, is that all funds budget or is that state school fund?
All funds
That's
budget.
all,
Okay.
So the caveat is that also includes our sinking fund balance, which is growing, so that's why our total overall budget is so large.
Yeah, so when I read this, approve the budget, how about if I say approve the all funds budget? Would that, because that way then it doesn't leave any room for question of whether it's state school fund budget or all.
Excuse me.
Okay.
That works.
All right, well, I'll start off with this. I move that the budget committee of the Paloma School District approve the all funds budget for the 25-26 fiscal year in the amount of $57,091,984.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Susan, can
Kim, do you have a,
I approve.
we got you, thank you.
Thanks.
Then the second part of that is I move that the budget committee of the Paloma School District approve property taxes for the 25-26 fiscal year at the rate of 4.8664 per 1,000 of assessed value for the permanent rate tax levy and the amount of $1.50 per 1,000 of assessed value for the local option levy and in the amount of $2,196,000 for the general obligation bond levy.
Second that.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Kim,
I,
Okay, it passes.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have the budget.
We have the budget. So the next step will be to the budget hearing at the board. And if there's any significant changes between now and then, I will be sure to let the whole committee.
Yeah, we'll keep you aware of what's happening with, especially the special education, bills and, anything like that that has, some connection.
So at our June 12th meeting, that will be where we'll approve the budget then.
adopt
The
it.
board will.
The board
Yes.
will adopt.
adopts it
we'll
and
adopt it,
sets the
yeah.
levies, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's good.
cool. Thank you all.
As we officially adjourn.
Thank you.
Students, great.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
thank you.
See the stop button.
Jennifer, you are amazing.